Hey folks, Doug Blake with Body Design University. Welcome to another live Saturday study. We are still, crazy enough, in Module 1, and we are still studying the kinesiology biomechanics of each of the muscle groups. In this video today, we're going to be going over the biceps and the triceps. So as always, even when we train or go through the discussion of the muscle groups, we start with the largest muscle groups first, generally considered to be the quads, the glutes, and the hams. And then we move forward from there to the smaller muscle groups. It's going to seem kind of odd because we generally end with abdominals. And don't get too concerned. Yes, the abdominals are a very large muscle group. However, we do it this way because we try and keep kind of concurrent with the way we train people, and we generally do abdominals last. That's the only exception to this rule of going from large muscle groups to small muscle groups. So today we are going to talk about the biceps and the triceps. In order to do that, I am going to share my screen here in a second. Hang on one second, guys. And I'll be able to give you that. So everybody got it? Give me a thumbs up if you can see the screen, please. Thank you. Okay. And so this is what we did last week, right? And this week we're going to work on the muscles of the arms. Let me go ahead and pull that out for you. Okay. So folks, just a couple of things before we talk about the biomechanics or the kinesiology of the biceps and the triceps are fairly straightforward. And it's not like you got a whole lot to consider when you're talking about exercise performance, not like when we're talking about larger muscle groups like the pecs. So those would be compound exercise movements, or the lats, again, compound exercise movements. Here, we really have to be careful. When we're training people, you got to be very careful when you train biceps and triceps, because by default, they are smaller muscle groups. Therefore, they have smaller tendon attachments, things like that, connective tissue issues. So we want to make sure that we are not doing anything during the performance of the exercises that's going to overly stress these muscles and their tendons. And the reason I say that is because I've seen probably, although I've seen major pec tears, right? I've seen guys literally pull their, while we're training, have a pec tear and just have it curl up. And I've seen those. But more frequent than anything else, believe it or not, are bicep tears. And I've seen them both ways. I've seen both. I've seen bicep tears from the elbow, the insertion, the attachment from the insertion. I've also seen, not frequently, but I've seen it, long head bicep tears from the origin of the, because remember, you got two heads, so there's two tendon attachments up and over the glenoid. And I've seen that as well. And again, I stress this because when we are training people, we've got to be very careful and understand that these muscles, even though they look big or whatever, they are smaller muscles. And therefore their tendon attachments can be overstressed. Triceps as well. So let's go ahead and start with the biceps. So kinesiologically, what do the biceps do? Pretty simple, pretty straightforward. They flex the elbow. What plane of motion does flexion occur in? What plane of motion? Sheila, give me the term. Remember, there's three planes of motion. What does flexion and extension occur in? What's the plane of motion? You guys should know this like that, right? Like a soldier, flexion and extension, like a soldier. Therefore, if you think soldier, sagittal, the sagittal plane, right? A soldier, right? Marching arms forward and backward, right? Legs move forward and backward. So elbow flexion occurs in the sagittal plane. Now, you'll notice what we also have here says that the biceps brachii flex the elbow and do what? Supinate the wrist. What is supination? Best way to remember supination is that if you were handing somebody a bowl of soup, supination, soup, how would you hand it to him? You would do this and you would put the bowl of soup on your hand and give it to him like that. That's the way I always remembered it. Soup, give somebody a bowl of soup. You wouldn't give somebody a bowl of soup like this, would you? No, obviously not. We would turn externally rotate, right? Thumb goes out and the palm faces, in this case, I'm showing you it faces up, but basically the palm faces forward if you're talking about anatomical positions. Everybody with me?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So the biceps are responsible mainly for flexion of the elbow. That's where the angle between the upper arm and the forearm is decreasing. Okay. So that's the definition of flexion, by the way, is when the angle between two body segments or bones decreases angularly, right? So 180 degrees, 90 degrees, 80, 70, 60 degrees. That's called flexion. That's the proper definition. And that's what the biceps do. But another sort of, side kinesiological function is the supination of the wrist. And you got to keep the elbow straight and just move the wrist. So supination of the wrist. By the way, you have actual supinator muscles that are located in the forearm. Okay. But just so you know, because the biceps brachii inserts into the radius of the forearm, you got two bones in the forearm. Yeah. Two bones. Your elbow is what bone? What bone is that representing? That's the ulnar. That's the ulnar. And the radius bone is able to rotate around the ulnar. So, everybody with me? Because of that, there has to be some muscular activity that can supinate and pronate the wrist. That's why we have all this incredible motion and movement, right? So the biceps assists and helps as a major supinator at the wrist. For those of you that don't know, does everybody remember Arnold Schwarzenegger? He's still kind of a thing, isn't he? Well, when I was growing up, and we're talking back in the 70s, he was the hottest thing. And I had a calendar of his, and then I would buy his books, and I wanted to learn everything I could. And he said one of the ways, I don't know if this is true or not, he said one of the ways, but I've seen him do it, and I've done it myself. One of the ways he would add additional training effect on his biceps was he would take, by the way, there used to be dumbbells. We literally had to unscrew them and put little weights on them to make the dumbbells heavier and lighter. Not like today where you have these solid dumbbells or the ones with the latches you can put into it. But back then we had little bars and you had to put them on. So he would weight, watch this. He would weight the dumbbell heavier on one side than the other. And the reason he did that is he said, well, look, if the bicep does this, what if I made this side of the dumbbell heavier? It would force my bicep to work harder. Does that make sense? And so
Oh,
that's what I just thought it very interesting. And I've done it. I've done it. You try to, when you do a curl, you've seen people do this. You may do it yourself. When you curl, what do? You start a certain way and then you do what? You twist it up like this, don't you? Yes? Who does that? Raise your hand if you do that. Yeah, that's a waste of time. So you don't need to be doing that. I'm just letting you know, right? If you want, look, if you want to do it, that's cool. Have fun with it, but it ain't doing really anything. You better just to grab heavier dumbbells and maintain a position of the wrist instead of doing all this and trying to. Why? Because what do we think? Incorrectly, by the way. What do we think? We think that we are going to develop, and by the way, this paradigm comes from the world of bodybuilding, where we're not just trying to grow our muscles, we're trying to do what? Get a peak, right? Does your training affect the peak on your bicep? No. You picked the wrong parents if you don't have a peak. Sorry. You need to pick the right parents to have the genetics to have. Y'all get this? That's the first thing. The second thing is, let me ask you a question. How many of your clients really care about developing a peak on their bicep? Exactly. Look, zilcho. So don't be talking about, okay, Okay, John, Mary, I need you to squeeze up at the. Come on, these people just got off of work. They want to work out and they want to get out of there and get home. And you're sitting there talking to them about trying to develop a squeeze at the. Come on, folks, that's not how this works. Okay, it's not 1980 any longer. It's not 1990. Okay, we know that this stuff is irrelevant for the average client. By the way, it's irrelevant for athletes as well. But who am I? What do I know? So, this is what the bicep does, right? It flexes the elbow. Now, so there is supination component to it, which is fine. If you're going to do it, that's cool. But notice there are two other muscles that work alongside the biceps brachii. So the large muscle that we call the biceps is the biceps brachii. We have two other elbow flexors, right, that assist and help the biceps brachii or actually take over control of the biceps brachii, all based on, watch this, the position of the wrist. So you guys know if you're holding a dumbbell, you can curl the dumbbell with your palm facing your face, right? Like this. I can curl like this. Yes. Y'all with me? But how else can I do a dumbbell curl? I can pronate. Remember, supination is one way, pronation is the opposite of supination. So you got to know these words. So supination, pronation, right? That's where we go medial internal rotation with the thumb going towards the midline of the body. Does that make sense? So when you go into what's known as a neutrally pronated position, I just took my dumbbell, I was curling it like this. Everybody sees my position of my wrist. You can see my watch. Now, when I do this, this is called neutrally pronated. What exercise is that called? What's the term that we use in the gym? We call them,
Curls.
go ahead, Ainsley. What'd you say?
Hammer curls?
Hammer curls. Hammer curls, right? So that's neutrally pronated. Does that make sense? When you go from a supinated position to a neutrally pronated position, you have now, from a biomechanical perspective, put your elbow and all the elbow flexors in the ideal position to pull and flex the elbow, which is why, in general, you will always be strongest in a neutrally pronated position when you train. In other words, I can use much heavier weights in a hammer curl than I can in a regular standard supinated curl. You'll get that? Yes?
Yeah.
So you go into this neutrally pronated position. Now, technically, the brachialis muscle and the brachioradialis muscles are active, more active in this neutrally pronated position. What happens when I do full pronation? Now what? Now that I'm in a fully pronated position, the biceps brachii, the guy that we've been talking about, becomes less and less active because of the position of the radius bone now being pulled over the ulnar. So mechanically, the biceps brachii becomes less of an active participant, although it's always active. But when we go into a pronated position, the only muscle that's really heavily active at that point is the brachioradialis. But I will include both of them. Brachialis, brachioradialis, they are both very active during the hammer curl, and then they maintain some high level of activity during a reverse. We call these reverse curls, right? You guys ever do these? You always do reverse curls to train what? The outer part of that forearm. And that's going to be your brachioradialis muscle. Guys, so you get that, right? Now, what does this mean in the real world when we're actually training people? Well, normally what I'll do is I do it more for fun than anything else because remember, your clients are not doing rear double biceps to impress their friends at work. Nobody cares if they have this well-developed brachioradialis muscle right here on the, nobody cares. But I will do, a bi or a tri set while I'm doing the exercise. Why? Because I can have them do their curls and they get exhausted. And I say, take a 5-second rest, catch your breath, now go into hammer curls and continue. And they can actually continue to do more and more of the exercise. So all I'm doing is adding volume to the set. Why? Because it's fun. right? And more volume for the average client is actually going to be have some benefit. Okay. I won't do that every bicep workout, but I'll just have some fun and we'll do, you know, regular curls into hammer curls with no rest. And then maybe I'll have them finish off with reverse or I'll start them in reverse. You get the idea. You can have fun with this, guys. Okay. The bicep curl police are not going to come after you if you do one before the other. It doesn't matter. Have fun. Your clients will appreciate it because they will really feel it in their biceps, especially if you do 10 reps and then you do another 5 reps and then you can push it as a all the way up to 20 repetitions by just changing the position of the wrist. Does that make sense? Nothing wrong with that. Okay. So that's the biceps, and you'll notice I wrote that in there. Two other muscles: hammer curls, reverse curls. You're more than welcome to have some fun with your clients as they're doing this. The triceps, let's move over to the triceps. They have the opposite kinesiological function as the biceps. Biceps flex the elbow, the triceps extend the elbow. So extension, from a kinesiological perspective, is when the angle between two bones or body segments, in this case, right? The forearm is actually two bones, increases. So flexion, decreasing angle; extension, increasing angle. That's the strict definition of extension. And so the triceps, by the way, like the biceps, their names indicate the number of heads or muscular heads to that particular muscle. Biceps has 2 heads, triceps has 3 heads,
Three.
right? So because of that, this is why you'll see bodybuilders, weightlifters will do multiple exercises because they're trying to work all the different heads of the muscle. Please keep in mind, just like the deltoid has multiple tendon attachments, and we say that it has an anterior, medial, and posterior head to it. Irrespective of the exercise you do, the entire muscle will work. The only difference, like when you're doing an overhead dumbbell extension versus a push down, or turning the wrist and supinating it and doing a cable tricep extension, you guys know there's about 1,000 different exercises you can do. The only difference between those exercises from one to the other is the sort of amount of stress that one head will feel over the other two or over another one. That's it. Which means what for a bodybuilder? Yeah, for a bodybuilder, it makes sense for them to do multiple different exercises that have a different overall effect on the different heads of their tricep. To your average client, how important is that? Everybody go like this. Zilcho. Because guess what? Your clients don't care about developing the outer head and getting that horseshoe on their tricep. Guess what else? If you didn't pick the right parents, you ain't going to have a well-developed outer head anyway. That's just the reality of it. Remember, the relative shape, length of your muscles, all of those variables are genetically predetermined. So you do this exercise, I'm going to do stuff closer to build this part of the triceps. Like, okay, whatever. It makes no sense, but go ahead, have fun. As long as you don't hurt yourself. If you think that that's what it's doing, you're wrong, but that's okay because we all want to train, and, doing close tricep extensions versus wider, maybe you feel a little bit better. It has nothing to do with the development of the muscle. It's generally more an issue related to the biomechanics. I'll give you, for instance, how many of y'all do like lying tricep extensions where you grab the bar and you let it down? They call them skull crushers. You guys know what I'm talking about?
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever done those? You lie flat on a bench and you got the bar up overhead and you do these guys. Yes. Well, some people, they feel it more when their hands are closer together on the bar. Got it? They do the exercise like this and they feel it more in their tricep. Other people, if they do that, same thing with curls or any positioning, when they do it with their hands close together, it actually hurts their elbow. Y'all get that? So they have to have their hands wider apart. Now, as a trainer, you're the one that is asking the questions related to this. Do you feel it here? Does it hurt here? That's what you're doing from a coaching perspective. But folks, it doesn't matter if you do them close or wide. That's not relevant as long as the tricep is being trained and stressed. Does that make sense to everybody? Yes? So, from a purely kinesiological perspective, the triceps extend the elbow. Now, just like I said, there was this sort of additional component to the biceps. We also know that the tricep, because of the long head of the tricep, crosses over the shoulder joint. It assists in shoulder extension via what we call the long head of the tricep. So I'm going to make this easy for you guys. There's probably 5 major tricep exercises. I ain't doing 5 exercises with my clients. How many exercises am I probably going to do with the average client?
3.
1, maybe 2. Yeah, I guess you could do 3. I don't want to train them that long. So if you can only do 1 exercise with your clients, which one would you do? Well, you would probably try to do an exercise that allows for full lengthening of the tricep while it's going through its range of motion. And this is one of the reasons why one of my favorite exercises to do with clients, as long as they can perform it correctly and they have flexibility enough their shoulder, are overhead dumbbell extensions like this. Now, you can do them with a bar up overhead, but a lot of folks have issues with shoulder flexibility. And you'll notice when I lift my arm up overhead, the long head of the tricep is immediately stretched, which allows for, if you've ever done it, come on, guys, you got to go into the gym and do this and feel it. When you lift and you hold a dumbbell up here and you do this, don't you feel a tremendous stretch in the back of your arm? That's because one of the 3 heads of the tricep, which generally does not get lengthened and stressed, is now getting lengthened and stressed. Does that make sense? And so I will do that exercise, one of my preferred exercises, as long as the client has the flexibility. Remember, don't just do it because I say I like to do it. You do the exercises with your clients that are going to be beneficial to them, not going to hurt them, not going to cause any issues. Now, the picture, but here's the deal. You see, everybody see this picture right here? This is an exercise. This is one of those exercises where we don't get much of a stretch in the tricep. So why do we even do it? Well, we do an exercise like this because depending on a person's relative flexibility in their shoulder, we want to be able to do an exercise that does stress the tricep, and it does so in the peak contracted position, but also allows for the understanding that they may not have good flexibility. And if they don't, the tricep kickback is a great way to train the tricep. It's a good exercise. It's not my preferred exercise. But by the way, let's say you're training somebody at their house and they don't have a push down machine and all they have are dumbbells. What are you going to do? You get it? If you're training people in a health club or a gym, whatever the case is, and you have the machines to do it, well, sure, use the push down machine. It's a great way to stress the tricep. So when you look at the sample exercises, you have tricep extensions. Look at all these different variations you can do. Folks, please don't just go and do exercises with your clients just because they're available and there's 10, 15 different exercises. Be smart about your choice because remember, you're not training people for an hour. You're doing maybe 4, 5, at most 6 sets for the biceps, 6 sets for the triceps. You will overtrain people if you do more than that. So you're doing 1 or 2 exercises for these body parts depending on the workout split. But again, I'm just giving you some sample exercises, curls of all types. Now, you'll notice, what do you see here? Push-ups and chin-ups. Now, and I'll come off. Most people will look at the push-up, chin. Most people just can't even do pull-ups anyway. So it's just not an exercise that I'm going to have the average client doing. But let's take a look at push-ups, for instance. I always recommend for the average client, I'm not talking about a bodybuilder or an athlete,
मुझे ट्रेन करना है,
right?
अच्छा तुझे पैसे
Um,
दूंगी।
hang on, Bina,
किधर
hang
है
on,
किधर है?
hang on.
आ जल्दी छोटी मानी।
Um, so so when we're talking about push-ups, I always recommend doing push-ups with clients. Why would you think that's the case? Why would you think that's the case? Because the average client is not strong enough to do some of these other exercises. Push-ups are a closed kinetic chain movement that allows people to, you know, uh, create variations in the amount of stress that they're feeling. How many push-ups can you all do? Right? How many can you do? Come on,
Like
Johnny. How many can you do? About fifty,
one setting,
60
in one
in one,
setting,
just knocking them out. 50, 60,
80.
80.
Yeah.
Jeez. Ainsley, how about you?
about like 20 to 25, depending on the day.
Okay, right? Guys, look, when we're having clients do push-ups, how many push-ups can the average client do?
10 to
10
15.
maybe.
10. Man, y'all are being really kind. Maybe with their knees on the ground.
That's
Remember, if
high.
you're training the average person, they can barely do one or two push-ups. You think I'm kidding? You haven't trained people, obviously. If you're training the average person that doesn't exercise,
Okay.
they're not doing push-ups. They don't do push-ups. And in some cases, just when we're doing our initial training, no problem, Bina. Even when people are doing just their fitness profile, so we can get a baseline, they can't do push-ups for 30 seconds. They die after 3 push-ups, 4 push-ups. So we have them do it on their knees and we have them start out that way. I bring that up because when we're talking about the biceps and the triceps, for sure, I will always put push-ups in to the workout. Always. In fact, I would say push-ups are probably the premier exercise for the average client. I like to do them all the time anyway. Now, look, I'm military, so we had to do push-ups and we had to, the 2 minute, if you remember that, guys, the 2 minute push-up test. Do as many as you can. And when you're able to do a lot of push-ups, that's one thing, which is why for athletes, Johnny, I'm not going to have you, I might have you do push-ups like at the end of a chest workout, this or that, but you do too many. So for you, it's just endurance. I need you to train a little bit harder with heavier weight. But the average client, oh no, their body is, listen, watch this, heavy weight. Think about it. Think about it. If you can only do 3, you're like, oh my God, 1. That's like doing a bench press with 300 pounds, and you're like, ah. So a person doing a push-up can get a really, really good workout. Now, push-ups are what they are. But for triceps, what do we normally do? To put more stress on the triceps, how do we position a person's hands? Think about that. Do it again, Ainsley.
Close grip.
Yeah, you go woo, little bit closer. You guys ever do diamond push-ups, nose to your, yeah. Yeah, look, if you want to really, really beat somebody up good, have them go into a push-up position, feet wide apart, feet closer to the shoulders, and bring the nose to the diamond, right? Um, Man, I'm hurting just thinking about doing those. But you get the idea. I I don't need, I mean, I can do an exercise for the triceps, and I definitely want to be doing those type of exercises. But my recommendation for pretty much every client that can do it, as long as it's not going to cause any pain or issues with their joints, have them do push-ups and have them do these multiple push-ups, right? When you're in training triceps, obviously I would go a little bit closer. What are ways to reduce or regress a person from an exercise performance standpoint that cannot do a diamond push-up on the ground? What do you do? What's the first regression? Knees to the ground, right? So when the knees go to the ground, they might be able to get down there and do one. What if they can't even do that? Well, now you start this process. I love doing this. You start the process of keeping their knees on the ground and then elevating their hands. The first thing I do is I put them on a step and I have them raise their hands on the step and see if they can do that. Ultimately, I'll get them to literally do it leaning into a wall. Think about this for a second. Put your feet back behind you, and then I have them put their arms up against the wall and go into a diamond like that and literally try and do diamonds from the wall. Try doing it yourself. All right, that's your homework. Try doing that yourself. It's really cool. And if I do them up against the wall. Why not? Because man, I tell you what, you will really, really feel those. Have fun with it, guys, when you're training people. You don't have to always use equipment and machines. Sometimes there's other ways to get people to train, in this case, the tricep muscle in a way that they probably never done it before. So, all right. Woo. Any questions on any of that? It's good stuff, right? Okay. Um, Look, I appreciate you all coming on board today for a discussion of the biceps and the triceps. Please, if you have not done so, subscribe to our channel. Let us know if you have any questions. I think you're supposed to share videos, right? Something like that. Aren't you supposed to do a like as well? We would appreciate if you do that. And again, if you've got questions, leave comments in the comment section below. Y'all have a great week. We'll talk later. Thanks.